Hey everybody, welcome to Commercial Construction Elevate the Industry podcast series. I'm your host, Dave Presida. First and foremost, I want to thank you for joining us today. You know, our content is typically based on commercial construction, but our guest today will discuss issues relevant to everyone, young, old, new in business, senior management, business owners, retired, or contemplating it. There's one common denominator here if you want to continue listening, and that is if you want to know how to improve your life. Now, that's a lot to say, okay? But we are very fortunate to have today our guest, a good friend, Don Fries. And I'm going to say he's a fantastic coach. Now, when I think about coaches, I think about sports, but Don coaches life. Today, we're going to focus on two areas, and that's leadership and retirement, and to use Don's words, finding your way. So Don, welcome to the podcast.
Dave, appreciate that. Look forward to reconnecting with you and getting a chance to chat with you for your audience. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Well, let's start out by defining coaching and how it differs from, let's say, consulting and mentoring.
Okay, no, great question. And while there are a lot of similarities, there are some differences too. So let me start with the similarities, if you'll allow me to. And basically, whether you're mentoring, consulting, or coaching, the important first step is that you're building a relationship, a trusting relationship, a supportive, safe space for someone to explore whatever might be on their mind, whatever they're kind of working toward. So building that relationship, building a level of trust, building a way to communicate is critically important. Now, in the cases of mentors and consultants, many of you who have been in mentor roles or consulting roles are selected because you have a unique expertise, a unique set of experiences, or a unique viewpoint that person that you're working with values. And that may be a process on how to get things done within your own company. That may be a network of people that you know that might be able to help the person move in that direction. And if you can reflect on if you've been in mentor and consultant conversations, you may very much say to recommend to somebody, you might want to try this. You might want to go talk to this person, do this, do that type of thing, and kind of giving somebody some insight on how they might want to proceed to take an action or to make an improvement. The coaching side of it is a little bit different, and that is where the difference really lies, is that the coach is there not necessarily to recommend a path, not necessarily to share their experiences and share their knowledge in that space. But the assumption is that the person being coached, that client, really knows the answers to what they're trying to do, to the things they're trying to do, the actions that they're trying to take. But they may be blocked on how to do it. They may have a set way of doing it, and a coach can potentially challenge that status quo. So working with a coach, the point is that really the client is the one that builds the action, that builds that action path in a way that's comfortable for them, that works best for them, because we are all unique. And the coach is there basically to ask some questions, to hold that client accountable for taking an action. They decide how fast they want to go, how slow they want to go, and the path that they want to take. Do they want to skip some steps? Or do they just want to follow a regular path? They check in with the coach to see how things are going, and maybe they reconnect or redirect. So the big difference is in a coaching relationship, the client owns what they're doing. They decide what they're doing, and the coach helps hopefully guide them and partner with them in that direction. Whereas with consulting and mentorship, a lot of it is what someone tells somebody to potentially do, and maybe they go off and do it. So that's probably the most unique difference between coaching, consulting, and mentoring.
Well, it's interesting because I'm a consultant, and you hit it right on the head. People with a specific experience that can help guide people to where they want to go. But you're saying in coaching, the action is taken by the client.
Right.
And what's the first thing the client needs to know before they engage you?
Okay, again, another really good question too. And there are a number of ways to go at it, but it really starts with self-reflection. Why are you engaging a coach? What is the goal of what you're trying to do? Is it, professional goals? Is it around, being a better leader, being a better teammate? Is it personal goals, being a better spouse, partner, sports coach, whatever it might be? So knowing why they want to get into it and the things that they want to work on is critically important. It's a situation where really the client leads the coach. It's for the client-coach relationships work the best when the client is energized and wants to work on things to improve both their personal or professional potential. And that's really what that's all about. So having a coach or having a client that is excited about the opportunity, that wants to explore some things, that is really comes with some good challenges, opportunities that they want to go with, is really a great way to start. They don't all start that way, and they don't all have to start that way, but the coach and the client have to be in full agreement on what path the client wants to go to.
So the why is the first question.
Yeah.
And you said that very eloquently. I imagine the best clients you have, and I say the best, the ones you get the most results out of, the ones that are happiest at the end of the day, they got to feel safe, and they got to be okay with being vulnerable, right? I mean, they understand the why. It drives them to do things maybe that are a little uncomfortable. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, very much so. And, we're all works in progress, and not all of us realize that, but the more we do realize that, we realize, what we really want to work on and what we're willing to accept is something that maybe isn't our strength, and maybe someone else is stronger in that space. But you mentioned the why, and I think that's really important. Is, science would say that if we really know why we're doing something, in many cases with my coaching clients, it starts with values. What do you value in your life? The thought being is that you will tend to be successful and significant if you take actions that support your values. If you're asked to do something that you don't really feel good about, you're not comfortable in, the likelihood that that's going to work really well is probably fairly limited. So, asking people why they want to have a better relationship with their boss or their partner, or, why they want to be a vice president in the next 3 years, and really diving in to explore more than, is it prestige? Is it money? Or, how, deeply, why is that important? So yeah, I think in many cases, some of the most successful coaching engagements I've had is when we really try to get people to explore what their why is. And they always come back to that. You can argue about the hows and the whats, but what is your motivation? What's driving you to go in the direction that you want to go?
So obviously understanding confidentiality, what, let's say your last several clients, were they all different? I mean, different ages? Could you describe a couple and what they were looking for?
Yeah, and it's interesting that, and I have a wide range of clients from early 20s to early 70s. And certainly the ones that are working in the professional space now, and you can work in your professional space in your 70s, that's not the issue. But a lot of the folks that are probably in that 20 to 60 range are asking a lot of the same questions. It's about, it's about COVID and, hybrid work relationships, and how do I connect with people in this new world. I'm a person that loves face-to-face connection. I love going to industry events and things like that, and you're not able to do that anymore. And that can be really scary and really uncomfortable for a lot of people. So a lot of the questions that are being asked, regardless of age, is how do I connect? How do I influence my boss? How do I connect with my team? How do I contribute and be recognized for those contributions when all you see is my face in a screen, 10, 12 hours a day, or whatever that might be. So a lot of the things that people are working on are very similar. It's how do I connect? How do I feel valued? How do I make a difference in, this virtual world we've been living in, and what's next in the hybrid world? So regardless of age, it's a lot of the questions are the same. Do you think people are more concerned with growing
within themselves or within their industry, or a little bit of both? In other words, do people come to you and say, look, I need to be better. I need to be a better person. I need to be better as a teammate because I want to grow in my business. Is that common?
It's common in many cases. A lot of my clients are tied through corporations that, let's say, will have a set of core competencies or a set of leadership behaviors that they're looking for their emerging leaders and current leaders to aspire to and demonstrate consistently. So a lot of my coaches come with a couple of things that our clients, come with a couple of things that they want to work on. And we usually start there, but it may grow into other things as life gets in the way and new things come up. So a lot of them start with some focus areas of, let's say, I want to be more of an empathetic leader. I need to provide more clarity. Whatever that might be. And a lot of it all in the end comes down to communication. Communication is kind of the root of everything. And how we do it can have a tremendous influence, positively or negatively, on those that we're trying to communicate with. So that's, again, why the virtual world is a challenge. Someone who's very comfortable in a face-to-face space may be very uncomfortable in a virtual space. That happens a lot with teachers now. Teachers who are going from front of the room to virtual, there are different techniques, there are different tools, there are different ways you have to connect with students. And if you don't take time to prepare for that, it can be a real struggle. So those are all the things that kind of come into that. Yeah.
Well, I have a daughter who was in that exact situation. You know her. She went from in-room, to virtual. So, COVID has changed a lot of things. I think it's pushed a lot of things forward, like you said, connection and how you deal with those things. Here's a very broad question, and I'm going to give you my definition, if you will, if it's even a definition. But what makes a great leader? And when I say that, what makes a great leader? There's a lot of things that make a great leader, but one of the things that I think, it's your ability to influence others in a positive way. You may have a different idea, but in a couple of sentences, how would you describe a good leader?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And you're absolutely right. Someone who's an outstanding leader, let's say in the military, may be totally the wrong leader for a startup. So there are certain characteristics that most people expect. The one common theme that I have seen, and I do appreciate the question, is effective leaders are really good at knowing what they're good at. They're also really good at not knowing what they're good at. And for those things that they're not good at, they're showing vulnerability. They're letting, their ego for folks that lead with ego, they're being vulnerable. They're saying, I'm not that good at this. Can you help me? They try to align themselves with people that might be better at the things that they're not. They build allies. They build advocates. They get, they're counseled by those type of folks. So that would be the one message that I think I've seen the most with effective leadership is they know what they're really good at, and they do it consistently day in and day out. They know what they're not good at, and they align themselves with great people that can help them get that whole package together for whatever they need for their organizations.
That's saying a lot. I always say you got to know what you don't know and be able to backfill, and any team. And, you're talking about individual coaching and team coaching, I assume, Don. And what is the difference?
Do some team coaching as well. And that's a lot about recognizing, we talk a lot about, especially nowadays, diversity, equity, inclusion. And there's some real power in inclusive teams and diverse teams, because you're bringing different thoughts to the table. So the challenge with working in teams is that if you don't have a common goal, if that team's not clear on exactly why they're together and what they're working for, it can be extremely difficult, especially when you have different points of view, especially when you have different styles of how people come together in meetings. And, the person that has to have the last word, the person that's more reflective and almost is waiting for an invitation to say something, but a lot of times their feedback is the most insightful of anybody in the room. So getting teams to recognize what they're aligned behind and why they're there, and then work on the equity side of things of giving everybody a fair chance to participate and finding out how to set them up for success. So if someone is, not comfortable speaking up when they're challenged, how do you put them in a situation where they're prepared to do that? Or there's another way to prepare their feedback so they can be the first to speak instead of the last. So not only recognizing the individuals, but the dynamics of how you allow the team to operate is critical. And a lot of the team coaching these days is going into that.
So in a sentence or two, describe the biggest issues you typically face when you're dealing with, and I'm going to give you 4 examples. The first one being a new business owner. What are typical issues faced by a new business owner that you might help in coaching?
Okay, and if I could, I'll liken it across to, I do some work with nonprofit leadership. So if I think of them as a business owner, what they would do is, many of them are so passionate about what they're doing. They have that idea, they have that vision for a business. They've gotten to the point where they're actually setting it up, a new business. They're energized, they're anxious to get their message out to the world. And in that effort to do that, do you grow too fast? Do you get out of the gates too fast? Can you really support the business that you're doing? Do you have the people in place? So a lot of times in airlines, startup airlines are a great example of this. When they get to a point, they hit a market, like People Express, right? $19 one way from New York to Washington.
I knew them well.
And everybody, and I used to do that for Thanksgiving trips between Virginia and New Jersey for several years. And that's a great idea. It was a great idea. They got great demand. And then they said, now what's next? So we have to grow. So they start growing, and eventually their business model is different than what they end up growing into, and they're no longer viable. So many things with a new business owner would be being so excited to get going and not maybe keeping in touch of the why and what supports that, getting good people behind to make sure if they're leading the vision, who's doing the operations, who's doing the financing and things like that. So that is one of those things when you let your emotion and your vision get away from some fundamental things that you need to do along the way.
So passion is critical in business, but you want to balance your passion with the realities of building a business. Never lose your passion, but I think that was well said. What advice would you give, or what are the biggest issues faced by, let's say, a young project manager?
Yeah, no, really good. And a lot of that is trying to figure out how they fit in, especially if, someone's coming in on a project, they're likely leading a project because they've done some project work in the past. They've been part of a team. They've been very good for a number of reasons, whether they know the process, whether they, have a skill or a trade that goes along with that, say, and the like. So they come with a lot of practical knowledge of how to work in a project. The challenge of getting promoted then as a project manager is you may not be as familiar with the leadership side of it, the supervisory part of it, the mechanics, the running the Gantt charts and everything that you might be doing in that space. But you may run the risk of saying, I'm going to work on those things that I'm good at. I'm going to help my team. I'm going to help that project team. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to go down and pound nails, or I'm going to go down and go through every project review and so on and so forth, because you think that you're helping. You think that you're making the team better. Now, the reality may be that the team looks at that and said, you're not allowing me as a team member to be at my best, to be accountable for what I'm doing, to achieve my own goals and aspirations. You're kind of in the way. Appreciate the effort, but I really need you to coach me on how to make connections, on maybe how to do things more efficiently, and give me things to think about so I can apply them moving forward. Be my coach, for example. So a lot of that, especially first-time project managers, you tend to go to what you're good at because you think you're helping. And in some cases you may be. That's not to say that never happens. But in other cases, you may actually be stifling that team from being the best they can be because you're not allowing them to grow. You're not allowing them to try things and bring their ideas to the table.
That's perfect. What would common issue faced by a senior manager, somebody who's been doing this for a long time?
So with that one, the landscape has changed. Okay. So if we're in an organization in 30 years, 40 years, and there's been a way of doing it, everything's been kind of done the same way. Now you're getting people coming to you saying, I want personal leave, I want time off, I want to work from home. You start seeing things changing in the organization that you look at and go, no, that can never work. If you go to the space of, I know what works, I know what doesn't work, I'm not open to some new things, that can be really scary. When you start seeing the company that the company that you've led, start changing in a way that may be 100% better, but you don't know it. You get uncomfortable with it. And the fact is that the only way we can really grow is if we start feeling uncomfortable about things and work to try to understand and get more in that direction. It's hard to grow unless you're willing to test yourself along the way. So for someone who may be more set in their ways, not open, not curious enough to try some different things, whether that's fear for them or fear for the outcome of the company, that tends to be the biggest challenge. How do I feel like I belong? Yeah.
You hit it on the head, because I know one thing that drives me as I get on with my life is that I'm curious and I want to learn. And I'm happiest when I'm learning stuff, but you have to be open to embrace that. And I think maybe people that have been doing it for a long time. And my next question, you just answered it. I'm not even going to ask it again, but what would you say to a veteran business owner? Much the same thing, right? Embrace new ways, understand how society is changing. I talked to a guy today, Don. Mm-hmm. The guy's looking for a job, and he's been a carpenter for 35 years. And he goes, yeah, I just can't get good help anymore. He goes, this new generation just doesn't want to work. Now, he doesn't even know me that well, but that's his perception. I'm old school, Okay, but if maybe you're not attracting young talent because you're, you think that way. I don't know, but
that's very possible. If you come across that way, if you're interviewing people or just talking to people and you're already dismissed a whole generation of probably potentially great, sharp talent, they'll have other options. They'll go elsewhere potentially. So attitude and approach to everything, being open-minded, being a positive thinker, being self-aware that comments like that might have the connotation that you don't want them to have, are all real important. That self-awareness is really critical, especially with all the change that goes on a daily basis.
Self-awareness, yeah. Last question in this segment, but it's a big one. What do you think stops managers from reaching out to people like you for help?
Yeah, I've thought about this a little bit, and what I'll tell you is, some of my experience in my first 20 years of my previous career was someone talked to you about getting a coach if they thought you needed to be fixed. If they saw you having some potential to go further in the company, but there were certain behaviors, certain skills that maybe they didn't see in you, and they thought they'd give you a coach so the coach could help you figure that out and get better at it. So, as I mentioned earlier, kind of going to my opening comment, if a client is not totally engaged in why they want to be with a coach, it's really hard to make that work. The client really has to want to recognize that this is a great opportunity and I'm going to explore new things and the like. So if you go in thinking it's more prejudicial to you than not, that's not going to be the best way for that relationship to work. So part of it may be, I've never had to ask for help before. Asking for help, that vulnerability thing is a sign of weakness. So You just figure it out and step in line and it'll happen, right? So status quo, I mean, you accomplish things in the status quo, but you really accomplish great things when you challenge that. And so I think as more and more companies that I work with now are recognizing that they've got a great bench of potential that probably needs some new skills and needs to explore some new things in order to lead in, the next 10, 15, 20 years. And, again, if you go with that self-awareness, some of that is that journey. What's their why? Why are they doing this? What's their commitment? Are you pulling people along that don't want to be the next CEO, but they're not strong enough to maybe come up and say no? Or you get somebody that gets to that level and looks back and says, I don't want this, but never said it before. So, how do you have the dialogue? How do you engage? How do you really ask the question, how can I help? What is it that you want? In many cases, the best leaders have been asking those questions for years. Some that maybe have struggled with keeping teams together and stuff like that, maybe that isn't the natural thing. But that's some of the challenge now, is that for many leaders, we're crossing into territories that they haven't seen before. And that can create some fear.
I know several what I call leaders who were thrust into a position because of family opportunity or whatever, who aren't ready for it. Mm-hmm. And, to say that some of these folks could use some good coaching because their heart's in the right place, but their mind and their processes and their thought process in particular aren't, and it spills over into the way they treat people. And I think a little, some good coaching could change that. Mm-hmm. Because they're smart people. They just haven't been exposed to anything for the last 35 years except what they're doing and the way they do it.
Sure.
So I'll tell you, that is a ton of good information. We're going to take a short break. And when we get back, Don, we're going to turn our attention to maybe another passion of yours, and that's retirement. So we'll see you all in a minute. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Presida, president of Adequate Construction Services, LLC, and I would love to talk to you business owners about your business. I bet you most of you that are listening have at least 75% of your personal equity tied up in the business. If you care about options on how to get that money out, that's what I want to talk to you about, because I've been through it. I was a business owner and I sold my business. Didn't even know there was a buyer, but there are plenty of them. There has never been a better time than now to sell your business. So maybe you haven't even thought about it. The last deal I did, I talked to him, I said, do you ever consider selling your business? He goes, didn't know I could. Well, yes, you can. There's a lot of options. I would urge you to go to my website, adicorp.com, adicorp.com. My last name spelled backwards. And go to Season 1 Podcast, Episode 2, Sales and Acquisitions. It's going to answer a lot of questions you might have. Yes, we talk about how you value your company, but that's only one piece, right? We're talking about why you would sell, who would buy it, common concerns about you, your staff, your clients, your legacy, all important things to discuss. So go and listen to that podcast and then contact me. Either call me or leave a message on my contact page on the website, and I will get back to you, because as I said when I started, I look forward to talking to you about your business. Between now and then, stay safe and stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to Commercial Construction Elevate the Industry. We're here with Don Fries, who is a life coach, and that's the best way I can describe it. He's going to give you a little more detail later. But Don, let's talk about what I would consider maybe your second passion at this point, and that's retirement. Not the money part. We're not talking about, being fiscally responsible and how much you got to have saved to have your lifestyle, whatever. But what's really important, though, to a lot of people is the emotional piece, I would assume, right? How would you describe your typical client who is considering retirement?
Yeah. So if I could, Dave, let me provide a little background on kind of why retirement coaching and maybe, what drew me to it.
Please.
Yeah. So as you might guess, your audience might guess, coaching is a second career for me, at least officially a second career for me. So I had 38 years with my former employer, ExxonMobil, and its heritage companies. And so I retired from ExxonMobil. So as I began my journey and thinking about kind of the what's next part of this, and that's really what retirement coaching is all about, is what's next? What's that next chapter in your life that you'd like to pursue and go after? I always loved the engagement with people, either through mentoring, coaching, teamwork, whatever that was internally. So I knew I wanted to find something that I could do in that space, as hopefully a service to others, but also as an opportunity to maybe learn and provide value. And what I found is that there's not a lot in the retirement coaching space out there. And so what does that mean? Basically, it said, what do you do next? And Dave, your question was about someone who's thinking about retirement. And I do believe that it's never too early to think about what you want to do next.
Glad you said that.
So I work with clients that are probably 10 to 15 years from retirement to those that are in retirement and still kind of trying to figure out what might be best for them going forward. So, it goes back to kind of that why. What are your values going forward? What are those things as you move on to those next chapters, the latter years in our lives, that are really important to you, that you want to make sure you put front and center in everything you do, or at least consider in everything you do? And the beauty of that is that is your choice. No one's going to sit there and tell you, there's not going to be a book that you're going to read to say you need to focus on your family and you need to focus on your health and you need to focus on this and that. You have to decide what's most important to you and how you want to spend that time. So as I got to talking with people, I realized everybody had a different thought going into retirement, from being totally fearful of how do I walk away from what I've been doing for 30, 40 years, 40, 50 plus hours a week. And that all of a sudden stops. If you haven't thought about it, even if you have, that can be really scary. I've, talked to others that basically say, I've got so much I want to do, I don't know how to do it all. So just taking kind of time to kind of figure all that out. And it's self-serving for me too, because I was going through the exact same thing. So as I thought about retirement coaching, it was more about connections, feeling valued, health and wellness, travel and leisure, anything that might come to mind to say, I've always wanted to do that, or why haven't I thought about doing this before? And really just giving your time to self-reflect, again, that self-awareness of what really brings you joy going forward. And how do you make that happen? And that's where this whole concept of and focus in retirement coaching came about.
So you're a perfect example of someone who retired, but has a passion to continue to do things, right? And I say that somebody who retires successfully is happy when they wake up, happy when they go to sleep, because they have control of their time, even if they're still working. They still have control of their time. They don't have to take a job if they don't want it. To me, that's, freedom. We call it retirement when you get old, whatever you call it. But you mentioned that there's an organization, I think, that you work with, and it's called Too Young to Retire.
Too Young to Retire, yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so as I said, when I was looking at retirement coaching, it looked like a pretty green field. So, one thing about coaching is, in the end, it's the client that really has the final say if a coach is good or not, if the coach has been helpful or not, has been a good partner along the way. But there are a wide variety of opportunities to get certifications and assessment tools certified and everything else like that. So as I was searching for the retirement coaching side, I came across this organization called Too Young to Retire. And it was actually a cohort based on a book that was written probably 20 years ago about some of the questions you might want to ask yourself as you consider retirement. And, if you look at the Webster's definition of retirement, it basically uses the word, it's an end. And we don't want may have heard this before, is that, I don't want to retire from something, I want to retire to something. So if you can take that positive approach to it, that's kind of where that comes from. So Too Young to Retire, this organization, which is an international group of probably 300 or so coaches that have gone through some sort of training to take into account those questions that most people that are considering retirement have, or in retirement have. And as I mentioned, those could be making connections, feeling valued, health and wellness, travel and leisure, whatever that might be. And so I'm certified in that. And the way their program works is it's really based on putting workshops together. So let's say, I go out and advertise, we're going to have a workshop on connections, making connections, keeping connections, starting new connections, whatever it might be. And then people would come in, whether virtually or face-to-face, if that was possible, just kind of share their stories, what scares them, what tricks they use, what approach do they use to maybe have really good outcomes with that, what questions they have and the like. And it becomes kind of a thought group around, learning from each other in that space. And then coaching can be part of that as well if people are interested in doing that. So it's a way of bringing a community together, a place where people hopefully can feel comfortable to ask questions that they might not know who to ask or have been uncomfortable to ask. And maybe explore new things, maybe meet new friends, maybe find people with similar interests that want to travel together, do whatever. So it starts off as kind of a network thing with a purpose of having people really reflect on their why. What are their values going forward? Why of their next chapter, and what do they want to do? And then potentially help enable them how to do it.
Well, you mentioned 4 key points, and that's value, connection, health and wellness, travel and leisure. I'm sure that's what drives a lot of people to what I would call a happy, successful retirement. And retirement to me doesn't mean you're done. It
Right.
means maybe you've ended what you're doing. I got to tell you, I know a lot of guys my age, older, some younger, who've retired, and their biggest concern was that their self-worth was tied up in what they did. And you go to a party, people say, "Hey, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do?"
Mm-hmm.
And when you say, "Well, I'm retired, but this is what I do."
Yeah.
I think, it takes, Don, people like you who understand the dynamic of what scares people sometimes, who have the financial resources or whatever it takes to retire, to actually say, you know what, it's time to end this, but at the same time, I want to start this. So you say retire to something. To me, as a person that is considering it, that's a big deal. That's just so enlightening and makes a lot of sense. But I think, going back to what you said earlier about leadership, people have to know why, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have, and I'm sure that the most successful engagements you have are people who have a strong understanding of why. Would you agree with that?
I would, and that's why. That's why I think it has to start there, to know what the impacts are, and what steps you really want to take, and how it impacts those people that are closest to you. A funny story I'll share if you'd allow me to. When I was talking to my wife about retiring, and we've been talking about this for years, but I was going to go a little bit ahead of when I had really planned to from a time standpoint. And the one thing she said to me was, "Don't expect me to be your cruise director." She knew me because I'd be getting up in the morning and saying, "What do we do today, dear? Where are we going for lunch? This and that and the other thing." And that comment was just a reminder that she had her own life and that she had things that she wanted to do that did not include me. And coming from an organization where in many cases my day was not planned for me, when I ate lunch was not planned for me, and I just kind of followed the step of whatever my calendar said on that day, that was pretty eye-opening. That meant I had to control my calendar. I had to control, in most cases, how I spent my time. And don't get me wrong, we had plans to be together. It wasn't like that, but I had things I could do. I had things I needed to do and wanted to do. And it was okay to do things separately in that. But that was just kind of that trigger that said, hey, I'm retired now. Everybody that I've been not spending the time with that they may have wanted or that I may have wanted to do, now I've got all the time in the world to do it, and they're not ready for you because they program their lives for those things too. And that can be a little scary. That can be that little aha slap in the face kind of thing. So
like with children, for example.
Yeah.
Right? And they're grown, but I'm sure your kids are grown.
Yeah.
But they might not be ready for you, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
That is scary. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So knowing how to ask them those questions on how you can be part of their life, you ask some vulnerable questions. That's where the vulnerability comes in too. So a lot of the things we talked about, even in leadership, span across on the retirement side as well.
Awesome advice. And we're going to take a short break. When we get back, we're going to ask Don pointed questions, and I guarantee you will not want to miss his responses. So we'll see you in a minute. Hey, everybody. If you're looking for a strategic business partner who does subcontracting work on the interiors, let me tell you about the CFP Group. They are a minority business enterprise and have been in business for over 20 years. If you're interested, you can contact them by email at cfpgroup1@gmail.com or call them directly at 410-977-8568. That's 410-977-8568. Take it from me. I've done business with them, and I know they can get the job done. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Commercial Construction Elevate the Industry. I'm Dave Presida here with Don Freeze, and we're talking about a lot of really cool stuff. And again, I said in the beginning that we're a commercial construction-based podcast, but everything that Don's talked about today is relevant to anybody in our industry. So, Don, we appreciate you again. You work with people of all ages. And I'm going to ask you what the biggest differences you think there are between young and old, and that's socially, right? Let's talk about the social aspect between younger clients and older clients. What do you see as the biggest difference?
Yeah, another good question. And we touched on a little bit earlier when you asked me about maybe a more senior leader and some of the things that, might concern them or blind spots that they might have. And, the world has changed so much just in the last 30 years alone. I mean, if we were doing this in 1990, we really wouldn't even have the internet. We wouldn't have Facebook. We wouldn't have LinkedIn. We wouldn't have all those things. And we also probably wouldn't have all the news that we do today, all the volumes of information that we get bombarded with along the way. But the thing that I find interesting from an age standpoint is you mentioned the social side. Younger employees, younger people tend to be more aware of those things that are very prevalent today. The importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in all we do. A lot of things going on in, the race discussions now and political parties and things like that. They have experiences and they're not afraid to ask about them. They're not afraid to stand for them. Not unlike some of us older generations at our time, there were things we stood for as well. But they're also more willing to ask questions that test limits. And many of them are trying to ask me, a lot of those I coach are kind of the, how do I do it? How do I still be respectful, but how do I get my point across? How do I become heard as opposed to being shut down? And the folks that tend to be a little bit older is, if there's some fear in having those conversations, how do I keep myself open for those conversations? How do I allow those to happen? Where can I find help and things like that? So I do truly believe with the clients that I work with and the experiences I've had is that people are trying to figure out how to cross the generational divides. I hear less now that, the baby boomers are like this and the Gen Xers are like this and the Gen Yers are like this. It's hopefully people recognizing that everybody, regardless of generation, has value that they can add. They may have different ways of doing it, but are we willing and open to listen to the ideas they bring and how they want to do it? So I think that is the real challenge about, I said communication was important. Active listening is incredibly important. Empathy, taking time to really understand what people are thinking. Emotional intelligence.
Wow.
How does what we do impact others? How is that received? And, that type of thing. So, there's a whole big area of things to explore if people are willing to go there.
Well, from a guy who has 4 kids, I will say that I've learned a lot from them because, and because I was open to it. They're smart, they're intelligent, they do stand for things that I never even considered before, and they're more socially conscious. And maybe one of my friends might say, well, I'm not going to repeat what they might say, but right. I look at it with an open mind and I say, look, I may disagree or I may agree, but I'm open to the way you're thinking. And it's changed me, and I hope I'm better for it. Anyway, big question here, and I don't want to put you on the spot because I think I could probably answer it, but I'm going to let you answer it. What qualifies you, Don, to be a great coach? Because I know you are.
Well, I appreciate that, Dave. There are a couple things, as I mentioned earlier. I think the real people that are able to answer that is the clients that we work with. And are they feel that the partner they've chosen to take this coaching journey with is helping to make the difference they want to see? And as a coach, hearing that from a client is probably the only, that's probably the best feedback you could ever get. The other part of it too, and I mentioned it, is how committed are you to what you're doing? So are you doing certifications? Are you learning the processes? Are you doing, continuously learning, doing other things like that? And that's kind of the functional aspect of that. And people can weigh how important credentials are versus not. But I do think there are a couple of characteristics that are helpful, not mandatory, but helpful. We talked earlier about self-awareness. What I will tell you is, as part of my coaching training, the first thing I did was go in depth and try to be fully self-aware of what makes me tick. Doing questionnaires and studying, going back to my first memory, those type of things. And that's where a lot of these programs will go, because they want the coaches really to know what the experience is like to really test yourself and really understand who you are and who you want to be. So I think that's extremely helpful. So I think self-awareness is pretty important. Active listener, in a coaching environment, the client is doing most of the talking. What are you hearing? Are you able to draw conclusions from that, either explicit or implicit? And are you making sure that you're checking in with that client to make sure that you're understanding what they're telling you, taking the time and the patience to do that and take that journey? Open-minded. So again, we're trying to promote curiosity, new ways of looking at things and the like. So I think that's critically important. Non-judgmental. The whole foundation of a coaching client relationship is it doesn't matter what the coach thinks or how the coach thinks about what the client's saying. It's what the client is expressing to help them with their journey. So, I may think, boy, that's absolutely crazy, but it doesn't matter. Because if I'm all in it as a partner with this client, I have to meet them where they're at, not where I think they should be or where I'm at. Being positive, recognizing that in many cases people are fearful, they might be stuck, afraid to try something, giving them the opportunity to think that there could be something positive if they did try something. That doesn't mean you don't meet them where they are. Again, if there's a sad moment they're going through or a difficult time, to certainly understand that and be empathetic with it, but also to recognize that maybe they don't have to stay that way forever, and you might be able to help them move in that positive direction. So I think those are a few that I would highlight. If you Google it online, you could probably get somebody with saying 40 or 50, but those are the ones that I try to represent as I think about my own self as a coach and how I try to live my life. So I'll share those with you and your audience.
Well, I can't agree more with what you just said. And, you used 2 words before called emotional intelligence. And I know for the first time I met you that you have a ton of emotional intelligence. And it's great to be able to, we said before, leadership, right? You're coaching, but you're also influencing other people in a positive way. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there's a higher calling than that. So I got to ask you one more question, well, two questions, but the first is, Don, why did you agree to do this podcast for commercial construction, elevate the industry? Because I know what it wasn't. Why did you?
Yeah. So it wasn't to kind of sell my services, but it was to hopefully highlight to your group that if you're looking for help, if you've got questions about either what's next or how to lead, how to manage, family and anything that you're working on that you want to be better at, again, to meet your personal and professional potential, there are resources out there to help you. And coaching is certainly one way to do that. I found value in it over the years. I have coaches and know that coaches have coaches, because we're always trying to get better. We're always trying to improve to make sure that we can be best for our clients. I've been very happy with the experiences I've had, professionally in this over the last 3 years, that there are a lot of companies that are investing in coaching for their employees, young leaders, even senior leaders, all individual contributors, the whole gamut. And again, you can kind of set the stage. Your client is kind of in control of where you go with the coach. And, I think there's some real value. There's some great coaches out there and in all sorts of different disciplines. Dave introduced me as a life coach. I do coach some things on life, but, it's not always just that. But there will be, if you need somebody, there will be somebody out there who can help, and I can help put you in position. If you ever have any questions, just feel free to reach out.
Well, let's ask the question: how can our listeners get in touch with you, Don?
Okay, great. So the first thing I'd recommend for those of you that are in LinkedIn, I'd ask you to reach out to me on LinkedIn. That'll give you an opportunity to see a little bit more about me. I do some blogs, mostly on the retirement space. So if you want to get a sense, if you have any interest in the retirement stuff, you'll get a sense of what that is and a little bit around Too Young to Retire. But other than that, if not LinkedIn, I'm going to give you my personal email address, and please feel free to reach out to me directly in that. It's D as in Don, J as in Joseph, Fries, Fries, the number 18 at gmail.com. So please feel free to reach out to me there. If you have any questions, if you'd like to connect, I'd love to chat with you. I'm here to help is a tagline I've used before. Hopefully there's more than that there, but I am here to help. So if you'd like to reach out, I'll be happy to be there for you.
Well, I can tell you, and I can speak for all our listeners, that if you are part of this podcast, you're better off, you're better prepared now than you were before the podcast. Don, I can't thank you enough for your willingness to share not only your experiences, but your advice to our listeners. It was great for me personally. I've known you now for a year, but I've learned more about you in the last 40 minutes than I had all the time. I didn't know you were a good guy. I knew you were sharp as hell, and I could tell you had emotional intelligence. But man, there's way more to Don Fries. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it, Dave. My pleasure. And thank you again for your time and to your audience as well.
All right. So again, thanks everybody for joining in. This is Dave Procida, Elevate the Industry, signing off. Until next time, stay safe and stay tuned. So follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Elevate Industry. Check out my YouTube channel at Commercial Construction, Elevate the Industry. Visit my website, adicorp.com, adicorp.com. Go to LinkedIn, search for David Procida, hit connect and follow me. Please rate, review, and comment on this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next week.